was a Tuesday afternoon in late September when the email landed in Keanu's inbox. Not his personal one, he rarely checked that, but the one managed by his longtime assistant, a woman who'd been with him since the early 2000s and knew better than anyone when to filter out noise and when to slide something onto his radar. This message wasn't noise. It came from the producers of Nightline Current, a late-night talk show that had gained a reputation over the past few years for its unflinching interviews and cultural commentary. The kind of show where guests either walked out looking like heroes or got dissected under the bright lights of public opinion. The subject line was polite but direct. Invitation to appear on Nightline Current, October 12th. Keanu read it twice, standing barefoot in his kitchen, coffee cooling in a chipped ceramic mug. Outside, Los Angeles was doing its usual dance of sun and smog, palm trees swaying like they had all the answers. He wasn't one for late-night TV appearances. In fact, he'd turned down dozens over the years, sometimes with a simple no thank you, other times with no reply at all. He didn't enjoy the spotlight unless it served a purpose. And lately, the only purpose that mattered to him was a small, unassuming nonprofit he'd quietly helped build over the last decade. A network of safe spaces for kids aging out of foster care. No logo, no press releases, just real help. Housing, job training, counseling, delivered without fanfare. This invitation, though, it mentioned his work. Not the movies, not the memes, not the internet's endless fascination with his mysterious sadness. They wanted to talk about the foundation. That caught his attention. He called his assistant. "What do you think?" he asked, voice low, like he was sharing a secret. She didn't hesitate. "They're good at what they do, but the host has been pushing harder lately, calling people out. It's become part of their brand." Keanu nodded, though she couldn't see him. He knew the type. Not villains, just people who'd confused being loud with being right. Still, he trusted her judgment. "And the audience?" he asked, smart, curious, a mix. Not just outraged junkies, that mattered. He'd never been interested in preaching to the choir or fighting with strangers on screen. But if there was a chance to reach people who actually listened, maybe even plant a seed about what real support looks like, wasn't that worth a few uncomfortable minutes? Later that evening, he sat on his porch, the city lights flickering in the distance like distant stars. He thought about the kids he'd met through the foundation, the ones who'd aged out of the system at 18 with nowhere to go, no one to call. He remembered one young man, barely 20, who told him, "Nobody ever just asked me what I needed. They told me what I should want." That line had stayed with him. It echoed in his chest like a heartbeat. Maybe this was a chance to say something real, not performative, not polished, just honest. He sent a reply the next morning. "Yes, I'll come. But only if we can talk about the work, not me." The producers agreed instantly. Too instantly, maybe. But Keanu didn't dwell on it. He wasn't naive, he knew TV was TV, but he also believed in showing up as himself. Always had. In the weeks leading up to the taping, his team prepped him gently. Not with scripts or talking points, but with context. They showed him clips of recent interviews. A best-selling author grilled for not using the right language. A musician cut off mid-sentence for not aligning with the host's take on a trending issue. There was a pattern, a subtle shift from conversation to confrontation, wrapped in the language of progress but feeling more like a trap. "They might try to corner you," his publicist said one afternoon, over tea in his living room. Not with malice, maybe, but to create a moment. A viral moment. Keanu stirred his tea slowly. "What if I just answer the question?" She smiled. "That's the problem." "You will?" He laughed, a soft rumbling sound that filled the room. "Is that so bad?" "No," she said. "But the world isn't used to it anymore." The day before the taping, he drove himself to the studio. No entourage, no black SUV with tinted windows, just his old motorcycle, helmet tucked under his arm, jeans, and a plain black shirt. He walked through the back entrance, nodding at security guards who recognized him but didn't make a fuss. Inside, the energy was electric, cameras being tested, lights adjusted, crew moving with practiced urgency. He was shown to a green room that smelled faintly of coffee and hairspray. A tray of snacks sat untouched. He poured himself water and sat quietly, watching the minutes tick by. A producer popped in, friendly but brisk. "We're thrilled you're here. The host is a huge fan, by the way," Keanu nodded. "Hope we can have a real talk." Oh, absolutely, the producer said, though something in his eyes flickered. Just for a second, like he wasn't entirely sure what real meant in this context. Back home that night, he didn't rehearse. Didn't pace. He made pasta, listened to a Miles Davis album, and called one of the foundation's coordinators to check in on a new intake, a girl from Phoenix who'd just turned 18 and had nowhere to sleep. They'd found her a room, connected her with a mentor. Small victories, the kind that never made headlines but changed lives. He went to bed early, slept deeply. The morning of the taping, he woke before sunrise, drank coffee on the balcony again, watched the sky turn from indigo to gold. He thought about his sister, who'd battled illness for years and taught him more about grace than anyone. He thought about his friends who'd passed too soon. About loss, yes, but also about how kindness could be a quiet rebellion in a noisy world. By the time he arrived at the studio that evening, he felt calm. Not nervous, not defensive, just present. The makeup artist dabbed powder on his forehead, careful not to overdo it. "You barely need this," she said. "Your skin's great," he smiled. "Must be all the napping," she laughed. "And the lack of drama, I bet." "Trying," he said simply. Backstage, the murmur of the live audience grew louder. Laughter, chatter, the occasional burst of applause as the warm-up comedian did his thing. Keanu stood near the curtain, hands in his pockets, breathing slowly. He wasn't thinking about lines or optics or how this would play online. He was thinking about the young woman in Phoenix, about the letter he'd received last week from a former foster kid, now studying to be a nurse, about how help doesn't always wear a cape. It often wears a tired smile and shows up on time. Then his name was called. He stepped onto the stage. Lights hit him like a warm wave. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, not wildly, but with genuine warmth. He waved, gave a small bow, and took the chair across from the host, who stood to greet him with a firm handshake and a wide smile. "Keanu Reeves," the host said, voice rich with admiration. "It's an honor." "Thanks for having me," Keanu replied, settling in. His voice was calm, unhurried. The first few minutes were easy. They talked about his early days in Hollywood, a funny story about a motorcycle mishap on set, his love for chess. The audience laughed. The tension in Keanu's shoulders eased. This felt like a conversation, human, imperfect, real. But then, as the segment neared its midpoint, the host leaned forward slightly. His tone shifted just a fraction, like a current changing direction in a river. "You've always been seen as this almost mythical figure of quiet goodness," he began, eyes steady. "But in today's world where silence can feel like complicity, some people wonder, why haven't you been more vocal? On the big issues? You have this massive platform. Don't you feel a responsibility to use it louder?" The room didn't go silent, not yet, but the air thickened. Cameras zoomed in. The audience leaned in, sensing the turn. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He just took a breath, slow, deliberate, and looked the host in the eye. And that's when everything changed. The studio lights felt warmer now, or maybe it was just the shift in the air. The easy laughter from moments before had faded, replaced by a quiet tension that hummed just beneath the surface. The host sat back slightly, fingers steepled, waiting. Not smug, never outright smug, but expectant, like he'd just tossed a stone into a pond and was watching for the ripples. Keanu didn't answer right away. He never did when something mattered. He let the question hang, not as a stall, but as a kind of respect for the weight of words, for the space between thought and speech. Around them, the audience held still. A cough echoed from the back row. Someone shifted in their seat. The cameras trained on his face caught the faintest flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not defensiveness, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe, like he'd seen this moment coming from miles away. He took a slow sip of water. "Set the glass down with care, you know," he began, voice low but clear. "I've always believed that what you do matters more than what you say." He paused, glancing out at the audience, not scanning, not performing, but really looking. Especially when no one's watching. The host tilted his head, smile still in place but tighter now. "But isn't speaking up part of doing something? If you see injustice and you stay quiet, doesn't that send a message too?" Keanu nodded slowly. "It can, but not always the one people think." He leaned forward just a little, elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped. I've met kids who've been failed by every system meant to protect them. They don't need a celebrity shouting slogans on a red carpet. They need someone to show up on a Tuesday afternoon and help them fill out a job application. They need a place to sleep that doesn't come with strings. They need to be seen not as symbols but as people. His voice hadn't risen. If anything, it had softened. But every word landed like a stone in still water. The host blinked. He'd expected pushback, maybe deflection, perhaps even a rehearsed quote about unity. Not this quiet intensity. This refusal to play the game on the usual terms. For a split second, he looked unsure. Then he recovered, leaning in with practiced concern. But Keanu, he said gently, in today's climate, silence can be interpreted as indifference. People look to figures like you for leadership. Don't you think your voice, your actual voice, could move the needle? Keanu didn't flinch. He looked down for a moment as if gathering his thoughts from somewhere deep inside. When he looked up again, there was no edge in his expression. Just honesty, raw and unvarnished. I've spent most of my life trying not to confuse attention with impact, he said. I've seen people say all the right things online and do nothing offline. And I've seen people who never post a thing, who give everything they have to help others quietly day after day. He paused. Which one is really woke? The question hung in the air, simple but devastating. A few people in the front row exchanged glances. One woman covered her mouth, not in shock, but in something like relief, as if someone had finally said what she'd been thinking but didn't have the words for. The host shifted in his chair. His smile was still there, but it had lost its shine. I'm not saying you haven't done good work, he said carefully. I'm just wondering why you don't talk about it more. Why keep it hidden? Keanu shook his head slightly. It's not hidden. It's just not about me. He looked directly at the host now, not with accusation, but with something close to sadness. When you tie your help to your name, it stops being about the person you're helping. It becomes about your image, your brand. He let that sink in. I don't want these kids to feel like they're part of my story. I want them to write their own. The audience was completely still now. No shuffling, no murmurs. Just silence, rare on live TV, and the soft hum of the studio lights. Backstage, a producer glanced at the control room monitor, eyes wide. The director gave a small nod. Keep rolling. Don't cut. In the green room, Keanu's assistant watched the live feed on a tablet, her hand over her heart. She'd known this might happen. She'd feared it, and hoped for it. On stage, the host tried again, softer this time. But doesn't staying quiet let others define you? The internet's full of stories about you, some true, some wild. But you never correct them. Why, Keanu almost smiled. Because most of it doesn't matter. He shrugged, a small, natural movement. If someone thinks I'm a sad guy on a bench or a secret billionaire giving away millions, fine. As long as it doesn't hurt anyone, let them believe what they need to. He paused. But when it comes to real people, kids with real struggles, I won't let my silence be twisted into something it's not. He leaned back slightly, but his presence filled the space more than ever. You asked why I don't speak up more. Maybe I do, in ways you don't see. Maybe I speak by showing up, by listening, by not making myself the hero of someone else's life. The host opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time all night, he had no ready reply. A beat passed. Then another. Then from somewhere in the middle of the audience, a single pair of hands started clapping. Slowly at first, then joined by another and another, until the whole room was rising, not in a standing ovation, but in something quieter, more meaningful, acknowledgement, respect, not for a performance, but for truth. The host, sensing the shift, nodded slowly. That's fair, he said, and for the first time it sounded genuine. I hadn't thought of it that way. Keanu gave a small nod in return. No triumph, no I told you so, just acceptance. The segment was supposed to end there. The director had cued the music, but no one moved. The host glanced at his producer off camera, who gave a subtle shake of the head. Let it breathe. So they sat in that quiet together, two men from different worlds, caught in a moment that felt bigger than either of them. Finally, Keanu spoke again, softer now. I'm not against speaking up. I've done it, when it mattered, when it could actually help. He looked out at the audience. But I worry we've started measuring people by how loudly they declare their goodness instead of how deeply they live it. He didn't say it bitterly. There was no judgment in his voice, just concern, like a friend gently pointing out a crack in the foundation before the house falls. The host exhaled. Maybe we've confused volume for virtue, he said quietly, almost to himself. Keanu didn't answer. He didn't need to. The words had already done their work. Back in the control room, someone whispered, "That's going to break the internet." But not in the way they usually meant. Not with outrage or memes or hot takes. This felt different, like a collective exhale after holding your breath too long. When the show finally cut to commercial, the applause didn't stop right away. People lingered in their seats, talking in low voices, shaking their heads like they'd just woken up from a dream. Some pulled out their phones, not to tweet but to text someone they cared about. Others just sat quietly, staring at the empty stage where something real had just happened. Backstage, Keanu stood up, thanked the crew, and walked toward the exit without fanfare. No entourage, no handlers, just him, his jacket, and the same calm he'd walked in with. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, the city buzzed around him. Cars, distant sirens, the low thrum of life continuing. He paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. No stars visible through the LA haze, but he didn't mind. He'd said what he came to say, not for clout, not for clicks, just because it was true, and sometimes that was enough. Later that night, in a small apartment across town, a young woman scrolled through her feed and saw the first clip. She'd aged out of foster care 2 years ago. She'd been sleeping in her car for 3 weeks before someone connected her with a program she'd never heard of. One with no flashy website, no celebrity ambassadors. Just a place to stay, a counselor who listened, and a chance to breathe. She watched Keanu speak. Watched him talk about showing up when no one's watching. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from being seen. Really seen? She didn't post about it, didn't quote tweet or add a hot take. She just closed her phone, wrapped her blanket tighter, and whispered, "Thank you." And somewhere, miles away, Keanu was already asleep, unaware of the ripples, uninterested in the noise. Just a man who believed kindness didn't need a spotlight to be real, but the world, for once, was paying attention anyway. The clip didn't explode right away. It wasn't one of those instant firestorms that light up every corner of the internet within minutes. There were no screaming headlines, no outrage bots flooding comment sections, no late-night comedians already mocking it in rehearsals. At first, it just spread. Quietly. Like a ripple moving through still water, touching one person, then another, then another. It started in the early hours of the next morning. A fan who'd stayed up to watch the live broadcast posted a short clip on a small forum dedicated to thoughtful film discussions. Just 30 seconds, Keanu saying, "I don't believe kindness needs a hashtag." No commentary. No dramatic music. Just the raw moment, uncut. Within an hour, someone else shared it on a community page for social workers. Then a teacher posted it in a group for educators. Then a nurse. Then a mechanic. People who didn't usually engage with celebrity news found themselves stopping mid-scroll, watching and feeling something they couldn't quite name, relief, maybe, or recognition. By midday, the full segment had been uploaded to the show's official channel. The comments section wasn't filled with arguments or memes. Instead, it read like a quiet gathering of strangers sharing stories. "My brother aged out of foster care at 18, one wrote. "He slept in a bus station for 2 weeks. This hit hard." Another, "I work at a youth shelter. We never get cameras, but we show up. Thank you for saying this." Someone else posted a photo of a handwritten note they'd received from a former foster kid now in college. "You were the first adult who didn't treat me like a problem." No one was debating politics. No one was calling anyone names. It was just human. Meanwhile, Keanu was on set, filming a small indie drama in the hills outside Santa Clarita. He'd turned off his phone after the taping and hadn't checked it since. He drank black coffee from a thermos, helped move a lighting rig because the grip looked overwhelmed, and spent his lunch break sketching in a worn notebook. Doodles of motorcycles, faces, fragments of ideas. He had no idea what was happening online, and even if he had, he wouldn't have changed a thing. But the world kept turning and talking. By afternoon, news outlets began picking up the story, but not in the usual way. Instead of framing it as a celebrity clapback or a culture war moment, many chose a different angle. Keanu Reeves redefines what it means to be an ally, read one headline. Another. In an age of performance, one man chooses presence. Even the more skeptical outlets couldn't deny the emotional weight of what had happened. The host himself posted a short statement on his social media. Last night reminded me that real change often speaks softly. Grateful for the conversation. That post alone sent a new wave through the online world. People weren't used to public figures admitting they might have missed the point. It felt human. Then the stories started coming in. Real ones. From real people. A woman in Ohio wrote about how 10 years ago, she'd been stranded at a Greyhound station with her toddler after fleeing an abusive relationship. She had no money, no plan. A stranger, tall, quiet, wearing a baseball cap, bought her tickets to her sister's house, paid for a meal, and disappeared before she could even thank him properly. She only recognized him years later when she saw an old photo online. It was him, she wrote. I never told anyone because I thought no one would believe me. But last night I cried. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because it was right. Another story came from a bike shop owner in Portland. He recalled a man walking in one rainy afternoon, asking about repairs for a beat-up old motorcycle. They got to talking. The man noticed the shop owner's son, a teenager with autism, struggling to organize tools in the back. Without a word, the man spent the next hour helping the boy sort wrenches by size, labeling bins, showing him tricks to remember where everything went. When the owner finally realized who it was, the man just smiled, paid for his repair, and left. He never mentioned it again, the shop owner said in an interview. But my son still talks about that day. These weren't viral stunts. They weren't staged for cameras or timed for PR cycles. They were just moments, small, unrecorded, forgotten by everyone except the people they touched, and now, those people were speaking up. Donations to Keanu's nonprofit, still unnamed, still operating under the radar, began to surge. Not because he'd asked, not because there was a donation link flashing on screen, but because people finally understood what the work was about. They saw it wasn't about branding or visibility. It was about showing up when it mattered, even if no one clapped. One donor, a retired school teacher from Michigan, gave $500, the largest gift she'd ever made. In the note, she wrote, I taught kids who fell through the cracks. I wish I'd had a place like this to send them. Thank you for building it in silence. A group of nurses from a children's hospital pooled their tips for a month and sent it in. A college student sold handmade candles online and donated every penny. A truck driver left an envelope with cash at the foundation's office in LA, with a note that just said, for the kids. The foundation's small team worked late into the night, overwhelmed not by the money, but by the weight of the trust behind it. They didn't issue a press release. They didn't post thank you videos. They just got to work, finding more beds, hiring more counselors, expanding their outreach. Back on set, Keanu finally turned his phone back on during a break. Dozens of messages flooded in, from friends, from his sister, from people he hadn't heard from in years. He read them slowly, one by one. His expression didn't change much, but his eyes softened. He called his assistant. Is it okay? He asked. It's more than okay, she said, voice thick with emotion. People are listening. Really listening. He was quiet for a moment. Then tell the team, thank you, and tell them to keep their heads down. Keep doing the work. That night he didn't go out to celebrate. He ordered takeout, watched an old Western, and went to bed early. But elsewhere something was shifting. In classrooms, teachers used the clip as a discussion starter. What does real kindness look like? They asked their students. Not the kind you post about, but the kind you do when no one's watching. In offices, co-workers talked about it over coffee. Remember when helping people didn't have to be a performance? One said, another nodded. Maybe it still doesn't. Even online spaces that usually thrived on conflict felt different. Arguments paused. People quoted Keanu's words not to win points, but to remind each other of something deeper. Calling people not woke enough. That's not justice. That's performance too. The line was shared thousands of times, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. And then came the letter. It arrived at the foundation's office in a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in careful script. It was from a young man who'd been in the system since he was 8. He'd aged out at 18 with nothing. No family, no savings, no safety net. A caseworker had quietly connected him with the foundation. They gave him a room, helped him enroll in community college, introduced him to a mentor who taught him carpentry. Now, at 23, he had his own apartment, a steady job, and was saving to adopt his younger sister when she aged out next year. "I never knew who was behind this place," he wrote. "I didn't care. I just knew someone believed I was worth saving. Last night I saw you on TV. You didn't talk about me. You didn't use my story to make yourself look good. You just spoke the truth. So I'm writing this, not for you to read, but because I finally feel like I can say it out loud. I matter. And that's because someone chose to act, not perform." The letter was passed around the foundation's small office. No one spoke. They just held it like it was something sacred. Keanu never saw it. Not because he wouldn't have cared, but because the people who ran the foundation knew he'd only say, "It's not about me." And they respected that. Days turned into a week. The initial buzz faded from the trending pages, but the impact didn't. Schools started partnerships with local foster care networks. A city council in Texas voted to increase funding for transitional housing after a council member played the clip during a meeting. A major tech company quietly matched employee donations to similar nonprofits nationwide. None of it was flashy. None of it bore Keanu's name. And that was the point. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Keanu sat on a bench near his home, watching kids play soccer in the park. A little boy tripped and fell. Before anyone could react, Keanu was already walking over, offering a hand. The boy looked up, wide-eyed, recognizing him instantly. But Keanu didn't make a show of it. He just helped him up, brushed off his knees, and said, "You okay, champ?" The boy nodded, too stunned to speak. Keanu ruffled his hair gently and walked back to the bench. No one filmed it. No one posted it. It was just another quiet moment in a life full of them. But somewhere, maybe in a dorm room or a shelter or a hospital break room, someone was telling a friend, maybe real change doesn't need a spotlight. Maybe it just needs people who show up. And for the first time in a long time, that idea didn't feel naive, it felt like hope. Weeks passed. The talk show segment had long since stopped trending, but its echo lingered. In conversations over kitchen tables and late-night texts between friends, in the quiet decisions people started making without fanfare. It wasn't a movement with a name or a logo. It didn't need one. It was just a shift, subtle but real, like the first thaw after a long winter. Keanu, for his part, had returned to his usual rhythm. No interviews, no appearances, no statements. He was back on set, back in his routine. Coffee in the morning, work during the day, early nights with a book or a sketch pad. He still rode his motorcycle through the canyon roads when the weather allowed, still stopped to help if he saw someone struggling with groceries or a flat tire. He never mentioned the interview again, not because he regretted it, but because it wasn't about him. It never had been, but the world hadn't forgotten. One rainy afternoon in early November, a teenager named Leo sat in a small community center on the outskirts of Denver, staring at a blank application for a trade school. He was 19, sharp-eyed and quiet, with calloused hands from years of odd jobs. He'd aged out of foster care the year before and had been couch-surfing ever since. A caseworker had connected him with this center, a modest building with peeling paint but warm lighting and shelves full of donated books. It was one of the places quietly supported by the foundation Keanu helped fund, though no sign said so. Leo had never heard of the nonprofit's origins. He just knew someone had paid his bus fare to get here, covered the fee for his GED, and introduced him to a retired electrician who now taught him wiring on weekends. That was enough. That day, as he filled out the form, the center's coordinator, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a voice like worn denim, handed him an envelope. "This came for you," she said. Leo frowned. "For me? Who from?" She just smiled. "Open it." Inside was a check. Not huge, but enough to cover his first semester's tuition, tools, and a deposit on a shared apartment. There was no letter, no note, just a small doodle in the corner of the envelope. A simple line drawing of a motorcycle. Leo stared at it for a long time. He didn't need to be told who it was from. He'd seen the interview. He'd read the stories. And now here it was, not a handout but a hand up. No strings. No spotlight. Just belief. He didn't post about it. Didn't take a selfie with the check. He folded the envelope carefully, tucked it into his backpack, and finished his application in silence. But that night, for the first time in years, he slept without dreading the morning. Meanwhile, across the country, the host of the talk show was sitting in his office, staring at his computer screen. The ratings for that episode had been the highest of the season, not because of drama, but because people had stayed to listen. His team wanted to replicate it. Let's get more guests like that, they said. More real moments. But he knew it couldn't be manufactured. You couldn't script authenticity. You couldn't stage humility. He'd spent the past few weeks unusually quiet on social media. No hot takes, no performative outrage. Just a few thoughtful posts about listening more, speaking less. His followers noticed. Some accused him of going soft, others thanked him. One message stuck with him. A note from a teacher who said her students had used his exchange with Keanu to start a kindness journal in class. They're writing about small acts they've done or seen, she wrote. No likes, no shares. Just human things. He saved that email. One evening, he called an old friend, a documentary filmmaker known for quiet, character-driven stories. I think I want to do something different, he said. Not another debate. Not another takedown, just real people doing real good without needing applause. His friend didn't laugh. About time, he said. Back in Los Angeles, the Foundation's office was busier than ever, but not in the way most nonprofits measure success. There were no press events, no gala dinners with celebrities. Instead, there were more beds being rented, more mentors being trained, more kids walking through the door with wary eyes and heavy backpacks, only to leave months later with keys to their own apartments and a sense of belonging they'd never known. The team worked quietly, fueled by coffee and purpose. They turned down offers from news outlets wanting to expose the secret behind Keanu's charity. They declined interviews. They didn't even put up a sign outside their building. To passersby, it just looked like another unassuming office. But inside, lives were being rebuilt, one quiet act at a time. One afternoon, a young woman named Aisha arrived for her first meeting. She was 20, soft-spoken with eyes that had seen too much too soon. She'd been bounced between 12 homes before turning 18. Now she was working part-time at a laundromat and sleeping in the back room in exchange for extra shifts. A social worker had told her about the center. She walked in expecting paperwork, interviews, maybe judgment. Instead, she was greeted with a warm smile and a cup of tea. No cameras. No questions about her past unless she wanted to share. Just how can we help you move forward? She cried then, not from sadness but from relief. Someone finally saw her as a person, not a case file. That same week, a retired firefighter in rural Oregon read an article about the Foundation's work. He'd lost his son years ago, a boy who'd struggled with addiction after aging out of care. He'd spent years blaming himself, wondering if he could have done more. Now he wrote a check for $10,000, the proceeds from selling his late son's truck. In the note, he wrote, "Let someone else have the chance he didn't." The Foundation accepted it without fanfare, used it to fund a new housing unit. No press release. No thank you post. Just action, and still the ripple spread. In schools, teachers began starting class with a simple question. Did you help someone this week, even in a small way? Kids would share stories, holding a door, sharing lunch, sitting with someone who looked lonely. No grades, no rewards. Just recognition that kindness is a practice, not a performance. On college campuses, student groups organized silent service days, cleaning parks, packing food boxes, tutoring kids without posting a single photo online. Do it because it matters, one flyer read, not because it looks good. Even online, the tone began to shift. Arguments still happened, of course, but more people paused before hitting send. More chose to listen before replying. A popular meme emerged, not mocking, but gentle. A photo of Keanu on a bench with the caption, "Be the person who shows up, not the one who shouts the loudest." It wasn't perfect. The world was still messy, loud, often unfair, but something had cracked open. A space for quiet goodness to breathe again. Then came the letter that changed everything for the host. It arrived in a plain envelope postmarked from Phoenix. Inside was a short note from a young woman who'd been in foster care until she was 19. She'd seen the interview. She'd also seen the host's follow-up post, the one where he admitted he might have been wrong. "I've been called not activist enough my whole life," she wrote. By teachers, by counselors, even by other kids in care. Like my survival wasn't political enough. Like my quiet gratitude wasn't valid. She went on. "But when I heard Keanu say that showing up matters more than shouting, and when I saw you actually listen, I felt seen. Not as a symbol, as a person." She ended with, "Thank you for choosing humility over being right." The host read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer, the same one where he kept mementos from his grandmother, who'd always told him, "Kindness is louder than noise." That night, he recorded a short video, not for his show but for his personal account. No script, just him sitting in his living room speaking straight to the camera. "I used to think being woke meant having the right answers," he said, voice quiet. "But maybe it's about asking better questions. Maybe it's about making space for people who help without needing credit. I'm still learning. And that's okay." He posted it without a caption. Within hours, thousands of people replied, not with criticism, but with their own stories of quiet helpers. A neighbor who shoveled snow every winter, a librarian who saved books for kids who couldn't afford them, a bus driver who always waited an extra second for someone running late. The internet, for once, felt like a town square instead of a battlefield. And through it all, Keanu remained unseen by choice. He didn't give interviews about the impact of his words. He didn't monetize the moment. He just kept living the way he always had, showing up, listening, doing what he could without needing the world to watch. One evening, as he walked home from a late dinner, he passed a group of teenagers sitting on a curb laughing. One of them recognized him and froze. Keanu gave a small nod, a half smile, and kept walking. The teen turned to his friends wide-eyed. "That was him," he whispered. "Who?" someone asked. "The guy who actually means it." And that was enough, because the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the donations or even the changed minds. It was in the quiet understanding spreading across the country that goodness doesn't need a stage. That showing up day after day for people who've been told they don't matter, that's the real revolution, and it was already happening. The world kept spinning. Seasons turned, leaves fell, snow came and went. Flowers pushed through cracked sidewalks in spring. Life, as it always does, moved forward. Messy, beautiful, and full of small moments that never make the news but shape who we are. Keanu was back on a film set by then, deep in the rhythm of another story not his own. Same as always, early mornings, long hours, quiet focus. He still made coffee for the crew, still remembered the names of the grips and the PAs, still sat alone at lunch sometimes, watching the horizon like it held answers. No one mentioned the interview anymore, not because it didn't matter, but because it had become part of something bigger, something that didn't need repeating. He never sought credit for the shift that followed. He wouldn't have known how to claim it even if he'd wanted to. The changes weren't loud. They didn't come with press releases or hashtags. They showed up in quieter ways, in the way a teacher paused before correcting a student, choosing kindness over being right. In the way a stranger held a door a second longer. In the way more people started asking, "How can I help?" instead of "How can I be seen helping?" One afternoon, months after the interview, Keanu received a plain envelope in the mail. No return address, just his name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small folded photograph. The note read, "You probably don't remember me, but I was one of the kids at the Phoenix Center last year. I'd just turned 18. No family, no plan. I slept in a 24-hour laundromat for 2 weeks before someone connected me with your program. You didn't know my name, you never met me, but because of you, I have a room, a job at a bike shop, and I'm taking night classes. I'm going to be a mechanic. I saw the interview. I heard what you said about showing up when no one's watching, so I wanted you to know you were watched. And it mattered. Thank you for seeing us when the world looked away." Beneath the note was a photo of a young person standing proudly next to a rebuilt motorcycle, grease on their hands, sunlight in their eyes. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a doodle on the garage wall, a simple line drawing of a bike, just like the ones Keanu used to sketch in his notebooks. He read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it gently and placed it in the drawer of his nightstand, the same drawer that held old photos, a worn-out keychain from his first film, and a note his sister had written him years ago. He didn't tell anyone about it. He didn't need to. Some things are meant to be held quietly, like embers that keep you warm without lighting up the sky. Meanwhile, the foundation kept growing, not in size, but in depth. They didn't open flashy new offices or launch national campaigns. Instead, they deepened their roots in the communities they served. They hired former foster youth as mentors, knowing that the best guidance often comes from those who've walked the path. They partnered with local trade schools, community colleges, even small businesses willing to give someone a chance without demanding a perfect resume. One of those businesses was a family-run auto shop in Albuquerque. The owner, a man in his 60s with oil-stained overalls and a soft spot for strays, both four-legged and two, had taken in a quiet kid named Diego after hearing about the foundation through a friend. Diego had aged out at 17, bounced between shelters and nearly given up. But the shop owner didn't ask for his past. He just handed him a wrench and said, "Show me what you can do." Now Diego fixed engines better than most seasoned mechanics. He had his own apartment, a dog, and a savings account. And every Friday he volunteered at the local youth center, teaching kids how to change oil or check tire pressure. "It's not about the car," he told them. "It's about knowing you can fix something that's broken, including yourself." No one filmed those lessons. No one posted them online. But they mattered. Back in Los Angeles, the talk show host had quietly changed his format. He still interviewed guests, but the tone had shifted. Less confrontation, more curiosity. He started each episode with a simple question: "What's something good you've seen this week?" At first, guests were thrown off, but soon they leaned in. A musician talked about a fan who'd paid for a stranger's concert ticket. A scientist shared how her lab had adopted a rescue dog together. A writer described helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries every Sunday. The audience responded. Ratings stayed strong, not because of drama, but because people were hungry for connection, not conflict. One night after taping, the host sat alone in his office, flipping through a stack of viewer letters. Most thanked him for the change. One stood out, a note from a teenager who'd been bullied for being too quiet at school. "I used to think I had to shout to be heard," they wrote. "But your show made me realize maybe my quiet is enough. Maybe I can help in my own way." He tucked that letter into his wallet, carried it everywhere. Time passed. The internet moved on to new controversies, new heroes, new villains. But something had settled in the culture, a quiet understanding that real change doesn't always come with a megaphone. Sometimes it comes with a listening ear, a steady hand, a willingness to show up without needing applause. And in small corners of the country, that understanding took root. In a town in Ohio, a retired nurse started a weekly dinner for young adults aging out of care. No organization behind it, just her kitchen, her table, and an open door. "Everyone deserves a place to belong," she'd say. In Seattle, a group of baristas pooled tips to help a former foster kid, pay for his first month's rent. They didn't make a show of it. Just slipped the cash into an envelope with a coffee cup drawing on it. In New Orleans, a high school counselor began keeping a quiet kindness journal, where students could anonymously write down good things they'd done or seen. Every Friday, she'd read a few aloud, never naming names. This week, someone helped a new student find their classroom. Someone returned a lost wallet. Someone sat with a kid who ate lunch alone. The room would grow still, not because it was dramatic, but because it reminded them they weren't alone in trying to be good. Keanu never knew about most of these stories. And if he had, he would have smiled softly and said, "That's how it's supposed to be." He wasn't a symbol. He never wanted to be. He was just a person who believed in showing up, consistently, quietly, without expectation. And in doing so, he'd reminded others that they could too. One evening, as summer turned to fall, he rode his motorcycle along the coast, the ocean stretching out beside him like an old friend. The wind tugged at his jacket. The road hummed beneath the wheels, and for a moment everything felt simple. No cameras. No expectations. Just him, the sky, and the open road. Later, he stopped at a diner he'd visited for years. The waitress knew his order by heart. She brought him coffee and a slice of pie without asking. "Rough day?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Nah," he said. "Just full," she nodded. Good kind of full? He smiled. Yeah, the best kind, and it was true. Not because of fame or praise or even the work itself, but because he'd stayed true to what mattered. Not perfection, not performance, just presence. Back home that night, he sat on his porch watching the stars fight through the city lights. He thought about all the kids he'd met over the years, their resilience, their hope, their quiet courage. He thought about the letter from Phoenix, the photo of the rebuilt motorcycle, the doodle on the garage wall. He didn't need the world to know what he'd done. He just needed to know he'd done it right. And somewhere in a small apartment above a laundromat, a young person opened a textbook under a desk lamp, dreaming of engines and open roads. On their wall, taped beside a class schedule, was a printed still from the interview. Keanu leaning forward, speaking softly, eyes full of something real. They didn't worship him. They didn't idolize him. They just saw in him a reminder that you don't have to be loud to matter. That showing up, day after day without fanfare, is its own kind of heroism. The world kept spinning, but for a little while it spun a little kinder, and that was enough.